welcome everybody to the third instalment of Greenlit U, the creative program of education for creative people who want to get their skills up in aspects of business, whether that's in marketing, in finance. And we have a very, very special presentation this evening from a woman that we first and foremost know as an actor and as a creator and as a writer and as a director, a full hyphenate, who's hosted projects on Greenlit. And it's an absolute delight. We were as we got to know Sierra, we discovered she had a secret life of a TikTok influencer with a huge following. And as well as those creative roles, Sierra is also a science educator and teacher. And during the pandemic, she built her following hugely with her TikTok account, Callahan's Questions, in which the community would fire in science questions. Was it just science questions or broad questions, just ask a teacher questions?
All kinds of questions, ranging from the scientific to the wildly inappropriate to the just interesting.
Well, we're not interested in science, and the wildly inappropriate we can keep for another time. But we're privileged, absolutely delighted that Sierra's joined us this evening, as you might detect if you can see her sweatshirt all the way from Canada, to help us discuss. There it goes. What's the bird?
It's a pheasant, which is not very Canadian, so I don't know what that's about.
Not a loony bird.
Yeah, it should be a beaver.
Anyway, we'll be learning this evening about how you as a creative can develop your social profiles, how to interact with social media, how it works, what's the reasoning behind it, how you can develop that critical following and that critical engagement. If you need to promote your creative work, if you need to build your community, you can't really do it in this day and age without social media. So as an absolutely fantastic addendum to the classes that Phil and I have given over the last 2 weeks, I'm going to bring her up. Please welcome Sierra Callahan.
Hi, so first and foremost, I'm going to pop some links in the chat just because these will be useful for you guys to reflect on afterwards. I'm going to take questions at the end and then I'll be answering them here. But basically the first link is my link tree. So it has creative projects, things I've worked on, my hosting platform on Greenlit, if you wanted to support that project, which you don't have to, but I'm just saying it's there. As well as the second link is something we'll talk about a little bit later on in the presentation regarding pay to play. And then the third one is a most recent project that I've worked on that basically we're going to talk about how you can assess what resources you have and how to pull them together into a real tangible thing. Even if it might not seem like you have much, you always have more resources and more assets at your disposal than you might initially think. So what I'm going to be talking about today is building a social media presence and how to hustle here with Greenlit U. For those of you who are unaware, because we have some people watching on TikTok next to it as well, Greenlit is a platform where you can fund creative projects. It's really awesome, way better than Indiegogo or Kickstarter. And we're going to be talking about how you can promote projects yourself and build a social media following and brand today. Oh. I've had a click, can't use that. So first and foremost, these are my credentials. This is my TikTok platform. So as you can see, I have a significant number of followers as well as my personal information so that people can send in their questions, because that's sort of my whole brand, as well as an email for people who are interested in sponsored videos, partnerships, etc. And then my link tree. One of the things that's really important to remember when you are building a platform is that your bio is filled out across platforms and it's suited to each platform. You want to make sure that your brand is consistent, that relevant information like contact information or projects, values, etc., are consistent and complete throughout your platform, so that if someone is just perusing through right away, they can see, what I do is in my name, but they can also see I have additional interests. Like here, I'm doing acrobatics, which is something that some of my followers are interested in, and also just shows sort of another side of me, as well as, that I offer tutoring, that I have specific values posted, and then additional projects that people can check out, etc. So having your profile filled out and visually interesting, well organized, and appealing is one small step that can make a really big difference. Next up, you want to make sure you're choosing the right platform for you and that you're using it correctly. So you don't need to be active on every platform because it might not be relevant to what you're doing. But if you are going to be active on a platform, you need to make sure that you're using it appropriately. So for example, I use mostly TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. The other platforms like Facebook and Pinterest don't really work for the content that I create, right? I suppose I could make infographics for Pinterest, but for the amount of work that would take, to the amount of viewership it would get, etc., is probably not worth my time. Whereas translating short form content from TikTok onto long form content to YouTube, that's a very sensible next step. And then on places like Instagram, I can put a fact of the day, et cetera, keeping it on brand. Now, in terms of these different platforms, you need to have good contextual awareness. So for now, Mark Zuckerberg is in communication with sort of European governments, and Facebook and Instagram might cease to exist in our neck of the woods because of how, depending on how that goes. So Facebook and Instagram might not be a good place to start looking to build a brand at the moment until that has been resolved, because it's probably not worth putting a lot of time and effort into two platforms that might cease to exist. That said, if you already have a significant following on one of these two things, you need to maybe start thinking about a strategy to transition them elsewhere. So for example, lots of people who did well on Vine are doing well on TikTok, or transition to YouTube, etc. Okay. I'm going to give a brief rundown of these different platforms and how they can potentially be used. So Facebook is a great place for ad space. It tends to skew a bit older. It can obviously be rife with political misinformation and infighting, which is maybe not the most constructive platform to be on. But if you're using something called outrage marketing, which I'll talk about in a bit, Facebook is probably the platform for you. It's also a great place to find supportive groups. So for example, for female filmmakers, places like Bossy and Feisty are some Facebook groups that put women together so that they can make film projects, which is pretty cool. Instagram is obviously great for things like going live. I'm going to talk about lives later in the presentation because they can be a really important way to build and maintain a social media platform. I'm actually live on TikTok right now as I give this to you guys, and hopefully they're finding it entertaining and interesting. If not, I apologize because this is a little bit different from my usual content, but it's good information nonetheless. Instagram is a great place for things like micro influencing and brand building. So for example, there is a platform on Instagram called Evolved Creative. They are a clothing manufacturer. They make these really great vegan, warm, comfortable, luxury sort of athleisure wear. And they don't really have the resources, because they're a small company, to hire someone like a celebrity. But a smaller creator like me, or elsewhere, that works out great. So we arranged a deal where basically they gave me some free product, because they weren't financially in a position to pay for the content because they are a smaller company. And I believe in what they're doing. It aligns with my values as a creator. I like that they're making ethical, non-sweatshop, vegan products. So I was very happy to promote that in exchange for some product. Other companies will pay, et cetera, et cetera. YouTube is obviously great for long form content and is really easy to monetize if you have a good business plan for YouTube. Lots of people are now making this their full-time job with things like audiobooks, video essays, news, effectively. The great thing about YouTube as well is if you're doing it well, you have all the same skill sets as effectively a small television company or a large television company, depending on what sort of content you're running. There's a channel on YouTube called 5 Minute Crafts. The crafts do not take 5 minutes. They're absolutely insane, but they have millions and millions of subscribers because some of their videos are just so ludicrous and they're very short, they're snappy, they're entertaining. So this is a very easy platform to monetize, but is definitely going to require the most pre-production planning. So for example, a TikTok video I can make in a couple of minutes. A YouTube video is going to be a full day of planning, fact checking, writing my script, setting up a green screen, filming, making sure, doing as many takes as needed, because I want YouTube to be more polished than a 1 minute TikTok video. And also it's harder to memorize more than a minute of script, et cetera, et cetera. Twitter is great if you're doing something in real time. It's pithy, it's great for comedy, it's great for staying on top of the news. Obviously, after the Oscars, the Will Smith slap incident was all over Twitter, and everyone had a take and everyone needed to voice their opinion and just sort of scream it into the void. If you have content that's moving in real time, like the news, Twitter is going to be a much better platform than, say, Instagram or Facebook, just because of the speed at which the various platforms go through discourse, etc. TikTok is great for short form content and sort of the goldfish audience, and I say that very affectionately. It can be great to just turn your brain off and scroll for a little while. TikTok has recently introduced a 10-minute video feature, which pretty much everyone has agreed is useless for the platform just because of how TikTok is used. Pinterest, great for things like recipes, fashion, interior decorating, more of a visual medium, so probably wouldn't host videos well, etc. And then things like LinkedIn are great for business building, networking, etc. If you're going to post content on different platforms, you need to make sure it's well suited to each platform. So for example, a story that I put on Instagram is probably not going to do well on TikTok. TikTok has recently introduced stories, but most people find it fairly pointless and redundant because of, Instagram already has it. If Instagram ceases to exist in the UK, maybe that'll uptick on TikTok. On YouTube, once you have a certain number of followers, you can go live. Going live is always a great way to build and maintain your brand. And you can also do daily updates or like posts on YouTube for your followers to see, which can be really helpful if a video is taking longer or if you have something particularly exciting to share with them, etc. Okay. Next, you want to analyze your competitors. So here I have Nami's Life, Miku, and Michelle Choi. These are three women who have very similar content. So effectively, Nami and Miku are two women living in Japan who film their day-to-day life, and they really romanticize just the mundane aspects of life, like cleaning their home, cooking a meal. They make it very relaxing, very soothing. It's very watchable. It's very easy to have on in the background. It might inspire you to try a new recipe or to clean alongside. That's something that's definitely on the rise, is people doing come clean with me videos or come cook with me videos. So it feels like you have company while doing those tasks. And particularly for people struggling with mental health issues, the come clean with me videos can make it much easier and more structured if they're struggling with those self-care tasks. So these two individuals, you can see, have thousands and thousands of subscribers, and they have a very similar business model. Neither of them show their face. They have similar music. They have similar filming styles. They do similar things, but obviously they're both wildly successful. Michelle Choi is a little bit different. She's American, so she doesn't have the same reservations about showing her face online. And she also has like a beauty and athleisure wear called Little Puffy Club. And you can see her Instagram is linked there with the Little Puffy Club merchandise. So it wouldn't make sense for her to not show her face. Whereas these two living in Japan are just facing different social pressures to, you can plaster your life all over the internet, but with a level of anonymity to make it okay. But if you have an idea of what you want to do, it's great to see what's already out there. So by analyzing your competitors, what I mean is if someone has similar content, what platforms are they on? What kind of content are they sharing? How often are they sharing? Is it working? Is it not? What can you do differently to put a spin on it? So like maybe you do a very relaxing, come clean my house with me. I'm going to cook a meal. I'm going to romanticize the day-to-day of my life, but you tell really bad puns the whole time so that there's an audio element to it that's interesting and different. Or maybe you just do the exact same thing, but in a different part of the world. So instead of doing this in Japan, you are maybe based in Brazil or India. So you can do the same thing, but you're showing different stuff. And that's where the visual appeal comes from, so that you're not in direct competition with just regurgitation, but you're still putting a unique spin on it. By working smart instead of hard, you're going to discover opportunities to differentiate yourself and your brand in the eyes of your audience. And building and maintaining that audience is very important. So, for example, the overall tone of your social media presence needs to match your established personality, values, and voice. If you're using multiple social media platforms, you need to make sure that your accounts are consistent and you have that consistency across accounts. Okay. Building and maintaining a social media following relies heavily on clarity and trust, and something called a mediated persona. So for example, my mediated persona is I'm an educator, I'm bubbly, I'm bright, I have a total non-judgment policy. People can send me any question and I will answer it seriously. I will give a real answer. I'm not interested in making anyone feel bad. And then my values are kind of reiterated through, this is my link tree here. So Black Lives Matter resources, fun science facts, LGBTQIA resources, sci-fi books that celebrate diversity, alternatives to self-harm, Native Women's Association of Canada. So these are all things that very much align with my values. And also when my followers come to see if I'm promoting a project, et cetera, they can get a sense of who I am as a person and see, whether or not their values align with mine. Now, something that's very important with a mediated persona is maintaining it appropriately. So my bubbly, fun teacher question answering social media persona, my mediated persona, is accurate. It's authentic. It's definitely a part of who I am. But on the flip side of that, I can also be quite sardonic and sarcastic and dark. And people who are coming to Callahan's Questions to see me answer questions and be bubbly and light and uplifting are not interested in that aspect of my personality. It's not what they signed up for. It's not what I presented. And so it can feel like a violation of trust if they see a comment where I'm being sarcastic and maybe the tone doesn't read well, et cetera, et cetera. So once you've decided what your mediated persona is, you need to very carefully maintain it, and you should respond to what people are responding well to. If people are enjoying more sarcasm, then you can lean more into that. If people are enjoying more dark humor, you can lean more into that. But once you sort of have it established, as at this point I have over 70,000 followers, those people know what they signed up for. Or if you're going to alter it, you need to do so very carefully, right? So for a good example, you can look at Disney kids who have successfully left Disney and gone on to other projects versus Disney kids who have not been able to make that transition. Obviously, that can be a little bit more complicated with child stars who might have issues with a lack of parental boundaries or potential issues of substance abuse, et cetera. But for some of them, it's just they can't make that transition from being viewed as a kid to being viewed as a competent adult, right? And you can make all kinds of progressions in your career, going from, for example, social media modeling to music to acting. But you need to make sure that those transitions are well planned and fit your brand and are within your established personality, values, and voice, that mediated persona. All right, next you need to share your awesome content. This might sound obvious, but some people can find this very cringy or awkward or embarrassing. But the fact of the matter is you need to make stuff and you need to share it. Or you need to make stuff that is embarrassing and acknowledge that it's embarrassing, right? Like, for example, things like video tutorials or jokes. If you're doing everything as a joke, like I'm learning how to use power tools and I'm not taking myself seriously because I don't know what I'm doing. That's relatable. People are going to enjoy watching that. And if something really is just not doing well and it's making you feel more embarrassment than you feel it's worth, you can always take it down and try again. And there's nothing wrong with admitting mistakes and trying different things and seeing where they go. When you first start out, you either need to have a really well-established plan. So for example, I knew I was just going to answer questions. I knew that on TikTok, I wasn't going to be dancing. I wasn't going to be following trends. I wasn't going to be using TikTok for the usual TikTok purposes at the time when I first started, because I started my TikTok when we went on lockdown because I knew my students were on TikTok and I figured it would be fun for them to, get some casual learning in on their scrolling time. Right. And that turned out to be really successful because I was filling a niche that was not being filled because obviously during the pandemic, kids were out of school, people were furloughed. It was all very stressful. And my content provided education, relief, it was fun, etc. When you start out, depending on what you're going to do, you either need to be as universally appealing as possible by sort of analyzing what's doing well and then trying something similar, or you need to not sweat it and accept that it's not for you factor. So for example, if you're going to be doing something really specific, like maybe you're going to restore antiques and you're going to talk about the history of the object as you restore them, you need to acknowledge that that's not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. There are some people who are not going to be interested in that, and that is what it is. The 70 to 20 to 10 rule, or 7-2-1 rule, is basically a way to build and maintain trust with your audience. So 70% of the time, you should be adding value, building your brand, making your own content. So 70% of the time, I am making my own videos. I am answering questions that have been sent to me. I am producing YouTube videos that are entirely my own script, my own research. It's all me, okay? And it's remaining on brand. 20% of the time, you should be posting other people's ideas, etc. So this is kind of like community building. You're supporting and uplifting each other. So for example, if one of my friends is doing a film project, or for today, I'm going to plaster this all over my social media. So I was resharing Greenlit, sharing posts, stories, etc. This is great for things like retweets, story sharing, collaborations with others, etc. And 10% of the time, you should be promoting yourself or your business. So for example, if you're going to do sponsored content, or if you have a film project that you're working on with Greenlit, you want to make sure that you either have a platform that is 100% dedicated to that film, that follows this rule of 70% of the time, it's going to be great behind the scenes or video clips or whatever stuff that is about the film. 20% of the time, probably film focused stuff of like greatest directors, or maybe like, up and coming female directors you didn't know about, or films I'm really excited for, or best moments of the Oscars, not the slap, et cetera, et cetera. And then 10% of the time, promoting yourself or your business. The reason for this is when people are constantly badgered or feel like you're trying to get something from them, it just becomes irritating. It becomes irritating and difficult, and people will disengage. If you're very transparent about, hey, I need money for this project, but here's why you adding value to this project will mean you get a great thing in the end, that can work really well. So for example, on Greenlit, if you're promoting a project, having really strong rewards, having a really strong pre-production proof of concept, mood board, a trailer, if you can put one together, a rip-o-matic, etc., showing people that you can really deliver, and then maintaining this rule so that for the most part, you're showing them why it's awesome, you're supporting others, building that community. This is almost like networking. And then 10% of the time going, hey, you should support this, and here's why, and here's the amount of money we recommend you give, etc. By building trust with your followers and providing them with really valuable content and information, they're going to be more inclined to support you. If a company was just constantly blasting you with only ad material, but they didn't provide a quality product, you probably wouldn't support them. So it's sort of the same thing. Showing versus telling. So I start all my videos with the same little spiel. I wave very happily. I introduce myself. I have kind of a catchphrase, which is, hi, I'm a real secondary school science teacher, and these are real questions from real students. I talk really, really fast. Apologies if I'm talking too fast during this presentation, but it is on brand. So, I'm following that mediated persona. And people know who I am right away. But then similarly, if you're going to be posting on other platforms, on things like Instagram, Twitter, etc., things like images, GIFs, polls, videos, make them more enticing, make them more attractive to people. It's a great way to engage your audience and get them to interact with you. People want to engage and be engaged with, particularly in this new world of COVID, where lots of people are dealing with a lot of loneliness and lots of things have been moved online and people don't feel as connected as they did previously. So this is where going live can be really helpful. Going live on platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc., can be a great way for your audience to connect with you. Generally speaking, live videos have more engagement than posted videos. That's going to depend on a couple of factors, like what time you're going live. If I'm mostly followed by Americans, so it makes sense for me to go live at a time of day when most Americans are going to be awake and scrolling. So in the middle of the workday, at American time, probably doesn't make sense. Whereas after school or earlier in the morning or whatever, depending on when people are most active on their phones, that makes the most sense. And you can check that data very easily. It's also often provided in app. So with TikTok, I know that the best time for me to post in England is like middle of the afternoon America time, because that's when most people, I guess, are on their lunch breaks or whatever. If you don't have that data available to you yet, because sometimes you can't access it until you've reached a certain number of followers, et cetera, you can look at other trends to see when phone usage is most active, or internet time is being most used by country, by gender. There's all kinds of demographics that are freely available on the internet, and it's worth doing that homework. There's sort of a pre-production phase to building a social media presence. So for example, when I started TikTok, it's slightly different because I knew I had a built-in audience. I knew my students were probably going to tune in, but I figured it would be like maybe 30 to 100 of them. But my homework was, I had gathered all the questions that they had given to me in my question box in my classroom throughout the years. I'd kept them all. And then I started answering those fast and funny and entertaining. So my pre-production work was gathering the questions, thinking about how I wanted it to be lit, set up, how I wanted it to be engaging, the tone I was going to go with, etc. And then literally overnight, I went from like sort of 1,000 followers, which was a big deal, to now 170,000. So that homework does pay off. People like to engage with real-time things rather than pre-recordings, because if they leave a comment, ask a question, they get that immediate gratification. For the person on the live who said they have a question, I am going to be taking questions at the end, and I'll be taking them from the live as well. So no worries there. Above all else, though, you need to pay attention to your chosen platform and how your audience is using it. If a long form LinkedIn status, for example, is getting a lot of traction, but the same post on Facebook isn't really getting any attention, say you're trying to find a DOP for a film that you're working on, then you can tell that the sort of stuff you're putting out there is maybe just doesn't work very well on Facebook. And you either need to change how you're operating on Facebook or abandon it entirely. There's nothing wrong with focusing on your efforts on the platforms that you know you're good at. And some people find things more intuitive than others. So for example, I find TikTok really easy to use. I find YouTube really easy to use. I find Instagram really easy to use. I don't understand Reddit or Pinterest at all. I'm probably not going to start using them because it's just not within my skill set. If I wanted to branch out into something bigger, then it's something I would have to start considering. Okay. Then there's the question of authenticity, algorithms, and data analysis. So this is from September to November. I had a huge growth in followers. I can see I've got mostly female followers based in these countries. This is when they're most active, etc. And based on that, it's a good idea to sort of target my content appropriately. So for example, I have mostly female followers. I get a lot of questions about periods, pregnancy, sex, things, but like from a female perspective. So it makes sense for me to be answering questions targeted towards my mostly female audience. It makes sense to cater to their needs. But I also have a lot of stuff about male mental health and toxic masculinity and how to solve those problems, etc. Because I want to be a positive role model and a positive space for the men who watch me as well. And I want them to feel engaged and connected and part of it. Authenticity is a big thing. If you are pretending to be someone you're not on a social media platform, because social media is very different from acting. So unless you've sort of made an Instagram and the idea is everyone on the Instagram is playing characters. So for example, like a sort of a miniaturized version of The Office being done in the form of Instagram posts. And it's kind of like funny, pithy, whatever. It's clear. It's maybe not obvious that people are acting, but it's clear that there's something going on, right? For example, there is a television show on YouTube called Has Been Hotel, and all of the characters have their own Instagram accounts, and they use that to promote information about the show, but also to show off the characters' personalities, fill in gaps, have extra content, etc. It's a brilliant marketing tool, and the show is currently in the process of being picked up by a major network. But in terms of yourself, if you are not behaving authentically on social media, people pick that up very quickly and are honestly pretty eager to tear it apart. So for example, there's big issues with young women in particular, wildly photoshopping their bodies. And I mean, smoothing out your skin is one thing, but totally distorting the shape of your figure is another thing. And people don't like it. People don't like being lied to, generally speaking. So even if you're going to lie, you need to do it with authenticity. Like people who say, yeah, I Photoshop my pictures tend to do pretty well compared to people who insist that they don't and then get found out. So it's very important to be authentic, be yourself, have that mediated persona, which is maybe a version of yourself, putting your best foot forward. You don't need to necessarily have your whole self on the internet. In fact, I would advise against that from a safety standpoint. And then you need to pay attention to algorithms and data analysis, because it's such a valuable tool. If I know my followers are based mostly in the United States, there's some slang, even though I live in England and I am Canadian, there's some slang that's not going to translate well. So I'm probably not going to use it, because why would I alienate the vast majority of my viewers, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So that's that. When to post, same thing. So knowing when to post is going to depend on your audience, but there's some general recommendations. So there's all kinds of research. HubSpot found that for Instagram, click-through times are highest from 12 to 1 p.m. when people are on their lunch break, from 5 to 6 p.m. when people have gotten home from work and are just kind of unwinding, relaxing for the day, and then between 8 to 9 p.m. because most people scroll on their phones or on their laptop or on their iPad before bed, which is bad for you, and you shouldn't do it because it causes blue light to filter into your eyes and it can disrupt your sleep. But that's when people are winding down and active on social media. So it makes sense to adhere to those times. Similarly, I can see here on what days people were most active, and going into my overview, I can see what times people are most active. And for me, it's usually around 6 p.m. UK time, which makes sense because that's about noon in America and in Canada. So once you have those insights and analytics about engagement, it's important to either see if your strategy is working and carry on, or reevaluate by determining day, time, types of posts to share to best reach your audience. Because the more engaged your audience is with your posts, the more your content will appear in other news feeds, the more it'll be pushed by the algorithm, particularly on sites like TikTok and YouTube. Okay. What we're going to see now is a little advert that I did a while ago.
Hi, I'm a secondary school science teacher, and I've been away for a very long time because so much has happened in the last 2 months. I was in 2 films, one of which I wrote, the other one I co-wrote and produced, so that was a very cool, fun, stressful challenge. And when I'm feeling overwhelmed, there's nothing I like more than to slip into something comfortable. Seriously, this hoodie is like wearing a hug, and pour myself a nice hot cup of tea to increase my positivity. Now, this hoodie was sent to me by the company Evolved Creative. I'm going to link their Instagram as well as a promo code in the comments, and you can buy their products if you're interested. And for now, I'm going to teach you some facts about tea, so come with me to Japan. Tea has been enjoyed in China for more than 2,000 years. Around 141 BCE, Han Dynasty Emperor Jingdi was buried with a wooden box containing important treasures he would need in the afterlife, including high-quality tea leaves. But before it became a casual drink, tea was considered medicinal and something to be endured rather than enjoyed. It did not become a British staple until the 19th century. Tea became fashionable to drink among the aristocracy in the 17th century, but it was relatively expensive due to high government taxes, so it wouldn't be enjoyed by common folk until much later. And finally, Turkish people consume the most tea internationally.
Okay, so this is an ad I did for the company Evolved Creative, but as you can see, it stays on brand. I still have my usual opening. I promoted some projects that I was working on as well as my Instagram, so that's a great way to sort of tie things together. It's a little bit cheeky, sneaky. And then just because I've had the opportunity to do a lot of international traveling, and because my whole platform is about educating and encouraging and cultural appreciation, etc., this is a clip from me in Japan doing a tea ceremony with a woman who's off camera, who unfortunately you can't see because of how TikTok cuts off the videos, who was about 100 years old and had been practicing the way of tea for like 80 years. Right. And then I have a long form version of this video where I go to Japan and I talk to people. I have an interview with someone about the Yakuza. I show the whole tea ceremony, the getting into the kimono. I talk about the history, the reverence, etc., of this whole practice. So in doing this advertisement for this small company who sent me free product but weren't able to pay me just because they're a smaller company and they don't have the financial resources for that, I've managed to make it a really great opportunity for everyone involved. So they get some free advertising, and I've slipped in some free advertising for my other social media platforms as well. depending on how you promote yourself, you do have to be careful. TikTok really does not like it when you talk about other platforms because they don't want people leaving their own platform, and other sites can be similar. So there are some creative ways around that, like putting the Instagram logo on the video instead of saying the word Instagram can be a good way to trick TikTok into thinking I'm not telling people to go check out my Instagram, etc. So micro influencers are individuals that have between 1,000 or more followers and are considered usually experts in their respective niche. So for example, I'm all about education. I am vegan and I post vegan recipes on my TikTok, Instagram, etc. On my TikTok, I have a little vegan cooking section. So doing something that's educational while also on brand ethically for me makes a lot of sense. Like this was a really sensible partnership for both that company and myself because they know I'm not going to bring their brand into disrepute, and my followers are generally speaking going to be the kind of people who are interested in vegan, sustainable, ethical products, etc. Getting big name celebrities can sometimes turn people off as well. Generally speaking, micro influencers have a larger level of trust and lower price point with their audience. So that can be a massive advantage. And if you get to the point where you have 1,000 followers in a specific area, it can be very lucrative. So when I've partnered with larger companies, for example, on TikTok, I did some promotional work for a tutoring company. It was 150 pounds per video, and that's based on followers, viewership, etc. If I was going to post that on Instagram, I probably couldn't charge as much because I don't have as many Instagram followers and I don't get as many views on Instagram as I do on TikTok, and all of that needs to be taken into consideration. Hashtags. So hashtags are really important on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, etc. You can generally check on the homepage what hashtags are going viral. And then if those are even loosely associated with what you're talking about, feel free to slap them onto your post. These are basically a way of driving the algorithm and helping direct the relevant traffic to the relevant pages. So it's important to push yourself to the top of that metaphorical pile because let's say there's 100 people doing pasta recipes, but one of them has a couple of viral hashtags or has used those hashtags really well, has a nicely laid out video and easy to access information, and doesn't have their whole life story before getting to the recipe, they're going to get a lot more engagement than those weird recipe video, like those recipe links online where they're like, here's the whole story of how my family immigrated to whatever, and then the recipe is right at the bottom because people don't want their time wasted. So the hashtags should change depending on content, what you're posting, where you're posting it. If there's world events going on or niche events, you need to be aware of those. So for example, on TikTok and Instagram, there's often Blackout Day where Black creators are featured and highlighted. It would be stupid of me to post things on those days, especially things relevant to like if I'm talking about myself or my accomplishments or my projects, because it's going to come off as in very poor taste, right? As a non-person of color, it's not my day. So that, that kind of stuff is important to be aware of. As well as, if it's Black History Month, I like to do like a fact of the day that's relevant to that, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't want it to come across as pandering. So I try to do those facts all the time because that's something I feel we should be appreciating at all times. And I think my followers would be inclined to agree based on why they followed me, most likely. Okay. Utilizing sponsorships and pay to play. So one of the links I shared at the beginning in the Zoom chat box, I'll repost it again if necessary, is basically if you need something to sort of take off immediately, there's no shame in paid sponsorships and pay to play. So organic views are great, but they can become increasingly difficult to achieve because basically most platforms are incredibly saturated with all kinds of content. It's very rare these days, in particular with every streaming service, social media platform, the thousands and thousands and thousands of creators to come across something that is genuinely unique. So it can be really hard to gain the same kind of recognition that you would have even 10 years ago, or, when YouTube was first starting out, and people have now, become most of the OG YouTubers are really successful these days because they got in on the ground floor. So Instagram has all kinds of features for promoting yourself. And generally speaking, companies are smart and they want you to pay in order to achieve things, right? In the same way that if you get an app on your phone and it has adverts, you can pay to make them go away. Sort of the same thing. So Instagram has things like the Explore tool, which I believe is unique to them. It's recently found that 72% of Instagram users made a buying decision based on something they saw on Instagram. Again, huge with the micro-influencing. If someone with a small following that has built a lot of trust endorses a product, people are going to be a lot more interested in it than if a company is pushing it, because there's just not that same transparency. But I have provided a link where basically you can pay for a certain number of views, a certain number of followers, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, especially if you're with film, if you need to sort of garner a large amount of success in a short amount of time, paying for like literally $2-3 for 1,000 views, and then taking that to an investor and being like, see, there's interest in this. I would only recommend doing that though if you know that there will be interest coming. If you're having to pay every time for every post to get views or for every, for your followers to maintain, that's not sustainable. That's not going to work. This is more of a once in a while, I really need this to do well, or I'm just getting started, et cetera, et cetera. Unless you're independently wealthy, in which case I guess do what you want. So learning from my mistakes, posting regularly. So I have unfortunately recently had a bereavement in my family, and I've already lost about 200 followers because I normally post daily and I haven't been posting at all for the last several weeks. And people don't like that. They want the consistency. And sometimes if you haven't posted in a while and then you do, people see you and then kind of reevaluate if they want to keep following you, and they unfollow, or people unfollow because you're not providing enough entertainment. They have other options, etc. And also maintaining that mediated persona, very important. Professionalism. If you're going to be posting stuff online, you need to be careful. For example, if you, in my case, want to be a full-time filmmaker, but you work in education, which is a very different realm in terms of professionalism, you need to make sure that the stuff you're posting is not going to conflict with the company you represent. So if you work at an office and they have a really strict social media policy, you need to read that stuff and be aware of it. Luckily, I work at a school that really values education in all forms. So they know I have a TikTok and they think it's great, and that's awesome. But that can obviously go, people have lost jobs as a result of their social media presence. Maintaining your brand, building it quickly can be pretty easy if you take the advice from this presentation and have a really good plan. But maintenance can become a full-time job, which may be the goal. So currently, because I answer questions, I have about 2,000 unread emails in my Callahan's Questions inbox, and I'm years behind at this point on answering people, and people don't like that. I've lost followers from that because, people want instant gratification, and I understand that, but because I'm only one person, that was just not something I was ever going to be able to achieve without a full team. And maybe this will become my full-time job one day, who knows? But maintenance can be hard work. So make sure you have plans for that. You can batch content, make a lot of it in advance, etc. You're going to switch between platforms. You need to make sure you have a plan and that switch is going to be successful. So for example, me going from TikTok to Reddit probably wasn't going to make any sense. Me going from TikTok to YouTube has been fairly successful. That's worked well. This you can read basically just some analysis that a software developer did, and this is what they discovered. And being aware of what terms, words, topics can get you demonetized, blocked, punished, kicked off of platforms, etc. You want to be aware of what the platform's policies are as well, because each one is different. And then in terms of hustling, you need to be aware of what assets you already have. So in terms of skills, you can watch tutorials how to do stuff, or you can do stuff yourself, record it, and sort of make that the beginning of building a platform. So, being bad at something and then showing your improvement over time. People do this for sports, gymnastics, building projects, art, etc. They're really entertaining. People enjoy watching the progress. It's very relatable. It's very humble, etc. Working for others. Can you sort of collaborate, exchange skills? I'll do this for you if you do this for me, etc. YouTube is attempting to take over TV at the moment. So effectively, you need the same skill set as a TV network. And it's very creator focused, which is great. I talked about that a little bit already. If you're a student, asking for discounts, student sympathy, that's a great way to get like cheap Airbnbs for film locations, etc. Lots of universities have networking clubs or can help you find other people. Yeah, students tend to get a lot of sympathy because people don't necessarily expect the outcome to be good, but they want to be part of your learning journey. And then if your outcome is good, on top of people feeling good about helping you, that's even better. Favors and collaboration, always a good one. Just again, sort of skill swapping. So I had this project, I contacted a director who is a BAFTA award-winning director, Martin Gooch, and said, I want you to direct this film. And he said, okay, I will direct it if you produce it. I had not really done any serious production before, so I didn't really know what I was doing. Basically, that was his way of testing me to make sure I was serious. I got to learn a new skill and I got a director. So that worked great. In terms of locations, you always have more than you think, and simplify scripts if you don't. Delusional confidence. I got this gig here today because I met Peter, the CEO of Greenlit, at Raindance Film Festival, and went up to him and said, hey, you should give me a job. And here we are. So, only be delusionally confident about things you can actually deliver, though. I don't recommend telling people you have skills that you don't. Like I wouldn't go on a kayaking marathon because I don't know how to do that. That would end bad. And then I can do that mindset. So on Possess, this project that I'm working on here, a lot of stuff I took on myself. So things like I've worked in theater. I'm not a professional makeup artist, but I was like, I can probably do my own makeup. And then that's one less person that the makeup artist has to worry about, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Fixing things, trying things, just trusting in your abilities effectively. This is all stuff I've managed to produce with this mindset of collaborating, sharing, et cetera. So this project, it was a lot of students who worked for very low rates. I'm always determined to pay people on my projects. I really don't like asking people to work for free, which I should probably get over because lots of people are happy to work for free, or a bottle of Prosecco, as the case may be. But so this project was objectively a disaster, but it got into the Raindance Film Festival. It won an award in Canada, and all it required was me going up to people and being like, hey, you should be a part of this, and here's what you'll get out of it, and you'll have this project on a CV, and I'm happy to be a reference, et cetera, et cetera. This Geneticide, I wrote this, it won all kinds of awards. And same thing, because once you've got a couple projects under your belt, what I can now do is go up to people and be like, hi, I'm Sarah Callahan. I'm this emerging filmmaker. Here are 2 projects of mine that have won awards and done really well. I've got some laurels. It looks impressive. And people are then more likely to work with you going forward if you sort of think about embellishing your CV, et cetera. And if you haven't made a project yet, you can talk about what school you're in attendance with, or do you know someone who would be impressive to work with. So for example, for Possessed, I was telling people BAFTA award-winning Martin Gooch is already attached to the project, because that was a lot more impressive than my 2 little dinky films that sure have won awards, but not BAFTAs. And then Lungs, this is a film that was done entirely in collaboration. So the Florence and the Machine fan club run in Europe has so many followers, and basically all of them were happy to donate 1 or 2 pounds, and that funded the entire project. I think we wound up with stupid amount of money. But then, so because we had this whole fan club and I was in partnership with the woman who was running the fan club, we knew we could make a project that catered to the taste of the fan club. So we collaborated with Florence and the Machine to make this sort of short film, high fantasy music video that had all the themes from the album Lungs. And we put it all together by just collaborating and asking for favors and getting people to get on board and putting together a really impressive lookbook and, really giving people confidence in the project because you have confidence in yourself and you can deliver something amazing. That reaches the end of our presentation. So if you have questions, this is your opportunity to answer them. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So I guess if you have questions, you can type them out or you can unmute yourself. And if no one has questions, then perhaps we'll resume. I know someone on TikTok had questions, but they might have left.
Well, if nobody in the chat's got questions, I certainly have questions.
Excellent.
Many questions. I mean, first of all, a fantastic presentation. Thank you, Sarah. I will probably have to watch it on half speed because you have this rapid delivery. And it's magnificent, and but just a bit fast for my old ears. One of the things that's very interesting. So I wanted to talk about, first of all, authenticity, because that's something we are very strong on in Greenlit. And when people are out there trying to present their project, I think the most important skill they have is to be open and honest and show an emotional authenticity and explain how that translates into their project as well. Would you say that's, you mentioned that as a broad thing for creating a social media persona?
For sure. It's really important. First of all, it's really important to believe in your project and to have something that you know is good. And I think developing the skill set to realize where, you know, your work needs improvement, that's a whole skill set in and of itself. But people want something to believe in, and you need to believe in your project and yourself. And being emotionally vulnerable, particularly online, can be very scary because you don't necessarily know how people are going to react. But one of the beauties of the audience I've cultivated, for example, is it's a very, like, we're not here to judge. We're not here to make each other feel bad. I think I could very safely be very vulnerable and not get any sort of nasty comments, etc. But purely film industry is a very different ballgame. You're going to receive a lot more criticism and skepticism, and it is a lot more oversaturated, etc. So having that emotional capacity, I think, is even more important there, because you want to strike that balance between, like, this film is going to be amazing and not, wow, this is obnoxious and off-putting, and like you're cocky as opposed to confident. There is a question in the chat. Do you try to maintain a color scheme or theme across platforms for branding? What are some apps that are useful for you with editing pics and videos? So in terms of color scheme, I'm actually going to turn that question over to Phil, because I think he's the resident expert. And then I'm happy to talk about editing pictures and videos, because that's more my area.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think and actually, I think it's perfect that we're tag teaming this, because I think the answer is different if you're representing a brand or whether you're representing yourself just as a creator or individual. I think for brands, it is important to have a really coherent color scheme. For anyone here, if you missed the last Greenlit U session, it's up on YouTube. It's all about branding. I do talk about this at length, so it'll be perfect homework for you. But I do think having a cohesive look and feel when you're trying to represent a brand, and by brand, I also do mean, you know, companies, but also like creative projects. So like if you have a short film, like having that cohesive look, I think really helps communicate what your story is. But if it's an individual account, I don't think that's as necessary, but I will send it over back to Sierra on that.
Yeah, I think having a strong personal brand, which is so weird to talk about yourself like you're a product, but you are ultimately on social media. Like, I am entertaining educational content for consumption. And I think having some cohesion can be really strong because people recognize you immediately, will be interested, it engages your current audience, engages and maintains your current audience, etc. So I always have my big giant glasses. It's a big part of my visual look. And then for my Instagram content, I film it usually in the same location. And for a long time, I was featuring my students' artwork, because sometimes they would make artwork and give it to me. So I'd have that in the background, and that's just a nice thing. And then for my YouTube videos, I perform it on a green screen so that I can either put up infographics to like add additional education, or I have this space background because it's all stars, and the idea is like you're expanding your mind. And I found that that's been very successful just because it has such a strong association. When people, you know, click on my stuff or see my stuff in passing, they know that it's me, and they might be more inclined to stay, or maybe they'll be like, oh God, not her, and run away. But yeah, I think having consistency can really work in your favor. Excellent. Great. Well, if no one else has any questions, this feels like a good place to wrap up. And if anyone needs any support with a film project, then Greenlit are the people to contact. You can find them on Instagram. And if anyone has any general science, whatever questions, then you can contact me, and I'm tagged in several of their posts. So we're all very easy to find.
That's fantastic. So yes, we're Greenlit Fund on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. Those are the platforms we do our thing on. It's been terrific hearing from you, Sierra.
Thank you.
And so thank you everybody for coming to Greenlit U. We'll be having some more sessions. Our next session is not in 2 weeks, as has been the norm, but in 3 weeks. And we're just waiting to confirm that. Will almost certainly be on film festivals. But if you watch our socials, you'll be receiving an email about it. Hopefully, you know, we can carry on the program of education that it's been an absolute pleasure to deliver. And once again, massive thank you to Sierra for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Everyone stay safe. Get your vaccine if you haven't already. Wear your mask, wash your hands, all that stuff. And see you at the next one. Bye.